Tell you what, gang, it's Thursday. You know what that means? It's the day before Friday. No, it's Thursday. That means it's the ABC of CBD. I'm what's left of Ross Kane. And this is Men's Radio Station. I love this show. We're in week 70, God knows what. Anyway, enough from moi. I've had a hell of a day today, by the way. It did not go the way that I was planning. Anyway, you know him. You love him. It's time for the hunk of hemp, the Maharaja of marijuana, the Count of cannabinoids, Ollie Mammon.
What's up, guys? How you doing? Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Oliver Mammon.
I've been good. I've been in the background and, kind of like in the back room, and I've been doing my own little introduction for you. So I've been sitting there like, his name is Russ.
Yes.
He used to be the eye in the sky. But
now
he is the voice of cannabis radio, Russ Kane. So that's what I was doing in the background.
Yes. Yeah, you've fallen at a few hurdles there, but apart from that, it's great.
But that's why you do the introductions, because you're better at this than me.
Well, it's my job. It's why they don't let me loose into a laboratory, because...
Have you had a good week?
I have, actually. It's not been a bad week. Although it was interrupted by a phone call with somebody who had a blown tire on a motorway, and that's caused a little bit of havoc today, sort of hit into the schedule somewhat.
As it does.
When you're trying to rescue somebody remotely and they're halfway up towards the Midlands. But anyway, did our best. Should we, I think before we do anything and bring on your delightful guest, who's wearing a rather snazzy hat.
I love the hat wearers.
It's a hat. Time to pay the rent, shall we?
I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD, a product created by users for users, a product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service, the cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price.
Boom. Love it.
Kablamo.
I just love it. Kablammer. I like that one as well. That's even better. Comments coming in from Veronica Curran.
Hello, Veronica.
Veronica's saying 6 o'clock. Veronica, I know it's 6 o'clock this way. The show has started.
The show
I'm
started.
not quite sure where that accent was. Somewhere between Poland.
It's somewhere northern. They all sound the same, though, don't they?
Poland,
it blends
Nova
into one.
Scotia. Christ knows.
It's like a little bit of a, like a beautiful northern twang. You've taken a little bit from all territories, claimed it as your own.
Northern twang.
I do love that. So we've got a great show today, guys. Actually, It's kind of going to be a bit of a fun one. We're actually moving back onto the subject of hemp. We're joined by Rebekah Shaman. Most people in the industry who know her know that she is literally a force to be reckoned with. Ooh. She's this, a little packet with a very powerful punch.
About 18 inches
she's
tall.
around this big. She's around this big, but generally she's got she's got a punch and half. So I mean, she's an incredible. You'll see her when she comes on the screen. She'll be standing up, and you basically see her like all of her. She's tiny, but she's like one of the most you could call it interesting people I've met in the industry. She's got an incredible past behind her. She's been running in these circles for close to 16 years. She's worked very heavily on the hemp side of the industry, which we know is a very under-supported emotionally and financially and politically side of the marketplace. We know how difficult that area of, you call it UK farming, is, as we've heard from Jamie Bartley in the past, as we've heard from Ed Hampage, we've heard about
it's potty, isn't it? Ollie, it's potty.
What?
It should be so
it's
much
insane.
more embraced.
It's absolutely insane.
You have brought me around to that viewpoint.
Rebekah's fully ingrained into that part of the world, and she's going to give us a great education here today. When it comes to hemp,
to be schooled.
Hi, guys.
So when it comes to hemp, everyone knows that my knowledge is good, but it's not as good as the experts in this industry. Hence why we usually bring on Jamie Bartley, and we've brought in so many of these hemp advocates to kind of educate us on, you call it the the pitfalls and the nonsense parameters which are built up around their industry. And Rebekah is very much involved in that world. Her activities in order to kind of promote the idea of hemp being a sustainable crop, being a carbon neutral crop, being something which we could literally change the world with is it's what Rebekah does. And I generally want to focus on that subject today because it's been a while since we've had a conversation about hemp. We always
There's only
talk
one
about
thing
CBD.
that worries me, Ollie. There's one thing that worries me about this show. She's going to give us Rebekah's going to give us a lot of information, but supposing she decides to keep it under her hat.
I'm sorry about
promise to share it with you, Russ.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Don't you worry about that.
Thank you, Rebekah.
Russ has got a proper 1980s sense of humor, so I do apologize about that.
That modern. Jeez, I thought I was still with Sid Caesar's show of shows in the 50s, but there we go.
Billy Shakespeare, all right? Billy Shakespeare understands your jokes.
Yeah,
but yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
And yeah, like I'm saying, it's I've heard a lot about you over the last 5-6 years that I've been around you. Your name's constantly cropped up. We've never really actually had the chance to interact.
Have you ever met?
Quite lovely that we got the chance to properly meet each other last week. So I met her last week and basically forced her to come on the show and enlighten us and share us with information.
Poor person. I'm so sorry. I hope he was polite. Do you know that Ollie and I had done something like 71, 72 shows and we'd never met? And I said, this is absolutely ludicrous.
We only met 2 weeks ago.
I
literally met Russ 2 weeks ago. He made me go to South London. You know that boys from Mill Hill don't travel down south a lot. So I mean,
and it was great. He's even more Ollie in real life than he is on screen.
And much taller, I'm sure, than what he looks like on screen. Because Ollie is quite tall.
That's it. I'm a giant.
You're a giant.
I had this last week. I saw him
look small.
I feel like
compared to you, Ollie.
Next to him, and I'm 6 foot tall.
So I saw Mags Houston last week. Mags was a guest. She was a guest maybe 6-7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, 13 weeks ago, like ages ago. She was a guest, and I saw her at the show, and I went up to her. I said hello, and she looked at me. She goes, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm Ollie." She was like, "You're Ollie?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "You look so different." I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, looking up at you, you look very different from looking directly at you." Instead, I expected you to be some tiny little snip. I never expected you to be a giant. So that was quite funny. But also, when I met Rebekah is literally the
I'm quite sure.
Probably the biggest she's ever met in hers.
Everyone looks tall to me, though, so it does add to
less.
But I did say what you lack in height, you make up for in a very powerful punch.
Thank you. That's sweet.
I know you've got that inside of you. So let's start. First question. Let's start. How did cannabis come into your life?
So
how did hemp come into your life? Your first interaction with it.
Okay, so I've always been a cannabis lover from the time when I was obviously a teenager and experimenting, and I've always had a love for the plant. But it wasn't until 2005 when I read a dissertation on hemp as a carbon sequestration crop, and I had been working in the corporate world in corporate social responsibility and sustainable development, looking at really viable green projects that were really doing something about the carbon issue and the climate issue. And I was seeing a lot of corporations working in the travel and tourism industry greenwashing on their environmental help towards the environment. And it was getting really frustrating because there didn't seem to be that many viable solutions to carbon sequestration, to soil remediation. And I read this dissertation and it was amazing. It just kind of ticked all the boxes. And I thought, how has no one joined the dots between hemp and climate change and the climate and seeing it as a viable agricultural crop for
what usually happens is everyone has the idea of, oh my God, let's do this, but they don't really think about how. So this whole idea of like carbon neutralization and carbon credits and all of this logic of, let's remove the carbon from the atmosphere. There's a massive push behind removing it, but the logic of how we're actually going to remove it, the push behind the actual education of it has not really been there. So I understand the way you're thinking because everyone's talking about carbon credits at the moment and offset your carbon credits and carbon neutral flights and carbon this and carbon that. But the actual you call it mechanism for, you could call it sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, the mathematical equation on how it's done, no one's really talking about that. And I still, to this day, 14 years on, like my brother works with, like my elder brother, he works in the metal industry. And he talked, like there's a big thing at the moment, there's carbon neutral trading and carbon credits. But no one's talking about how to actually reduce your carbon. It's just buy a credit. And when you buy a credit, you ask the company how they're removing, how they're going to be doing it. And it's all in process. There's no actual fixed
my
play
favorite,
at the moment, which
I got to say,
quite funny.
I got to say that my favorite tweet of the last 7 days was from a British missile company that specializes in, obviously, missiles are there to destroy things. And they're going on, they've got a new ground-to-air missile, which takes out jets and fighters and everything, right? But they're going on about how wonderful it is for the environment. And I just cracked up because, I get a lot of guests who are always pushing this agenda. And so many corporates are just jumping on this bandwagon and using it and just talking out their backsides to be perfect. And I call them out on it. I just think it's nonsense. But the ultimate to me was an arms company. I've got, it is what it is. I'm not going to comment on that. But to say it's so wonderful for the environment, it's not so great.
Eco-friendly bombs. That's exactly what we need. Like eco-friendly bombs, eco-friendly world destruction, and eco-friendly world war in order to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere. That is business right there.
When the missile hits his jet fighter, it's not so. He's carbon neutralized. That's for sure.
You can always find a way of greenwashing anything. That's sadly.
Can I ask you, because I get thrown this phrase a lot, and I've never had the opportunity. What does greenwashing mean?
Well, it means claiming that you're doing something for the environment, but it's you're like money laundering. It's like
you're BS.
It's just you're greenwashing it. Yeah. And and the reality of it is that the solutions are out there, but it means investment and changing the way the systems are working, and it will take an incredible amount of a shift in consciousness really to actually really have a desire to change. And unfortunately, while there's no political will to change some of the way the system is working, then corporations, all they can do is really just greenwash, because while the main the underlying current is to maximize profit for shareholders, sure. Then actually changing things to make things greener and more sustainable doesn't really necessarily need to fit into the remit. So unless you have a triple bottom line, it's a problem.
Rebekah, and I don't want to take this away from you in the least, but you know what this is really like? It's like mental health in the workplace, which obviously we founded Men's radio station all around mental health and well-being. That was the whole thrust of it. But so many companies, especially the large corporations, they're paying lip service to, yes, we've got mental health in the workplace. Then you've got a downturn in the economy. It's greenwashing and mental health washing is what I call it, because people are struggling to survive. So it goes to the back of the queue.
Well,
understandably, I mean, it's a very complicated issue.
It's very, very complicated. And while you can have someone like I don't want to get too political here, but P&O being able to sack 800 workers without having any remit, then you actually look at, and that's people. I mean, the environment goes a lot lower than that.
This is you're dealing with human beings. Anyway, sorry, that's for another time. You're very welcome anytime to come back, because obviously you've got lots to say about it, which would be great. Sorry,
I didn't mean to well of knowledge. No, don't stop. Anyway, I interrupted her first. Rebekah, carry on your sentence before me and Russ both rudely interrupted you. Mainly Russ. Russ.
This was in so that was in 2005, and at the time carbon credits was starting to be touted as a way of managing pollution. So it was very early days, and I suddenly thought, oh my god, this agricultural crop actually could potentially really support this industry and actually bring environmental benefits. So I set up Hemp Global Solutions and started to educate on the importance of hemp as an environmental and agricultural crop. Unfortunately, it was a bit early in the understanding of what hemp could actually do. And the education was really, really poor at that time. And people actually at that time didn't know the difference between hemp and marijuana and cannabis. It was all connected in together. And actually, you really saw a shift in the awareness of hemp once CBD had come onto the marketplace, which was much later, like 2012. So we set up this company and started to look at carbon sequestration and companies starting to offset carbon. We did some tests and we did a research grow with De Montfort University and Emerson College and what was the other one? De Montfort and Emerson College. And then we also did another grow in 2008 as well in Lincolnshire, growing for seed and looking at the environmental benefits of hemp. So I got into it quite early on.
So question, what were the rules with growing hemp then? It wasn't just throw the seeds and hope for the best. As in there's a lengthy, long process when it comes to growing hemp, and there are many hoops you have to jump through in order to satisfy, we could call it, in order to satisfy legalities. It's not like growing anything else. There are rules around it, right? And there are barriers around it, and there are, what's the word? There's nonsense. That's what there's nonsense around the industry, which restricts it, which holds it back, which stops people from actually being able to do the good that we believe and know we can do. So, like, what were some of the restrictions which you faced when you were, doing your first grows?
Well, let's unpick it a little bit. So under the UN Convention of 1961, the UN Convention of Misuse of Drugs in 1961, one of the things that they wrote into that every country had to have a cannabis agency. And that would regulate and control the usage of cannabis, of which hemp was included in that. Now, for the viewers who I'm sure who'd be following you, hemp is 0.2% THC, and our cannabis agency is the Drugs and Firearms Department of the Home Office. So that's where they decided to put the cannabis agency. So when you apply for your license to grow hemp, you are applying to this department that obviously is dealing with quite intense and dangerous licenses, drugs and firearms licenses. And so there is no agricultural support or any crop support within this department.
Rebekah, can I jump in? What is this thing? Because they did the same in the States, didn't they? And it always dazzles me. They think, oh no, what can we do? We've got to get a catchy title, shove it in with guns. It's so illogical, isn't it?
It does make sense though, Russ, if you think about it, because I'll tell you why it makes sense. It makes sense because every single farmer, likes to obviously have copious amounts of alcohol and a hell of a lot of guns. That's probably the logic. It doesn't make any sense, Russ.
I was going to get a proper answer.
No, it makes no sense. I tell you what, I just thought, I'll play around a little bit. It literally makes no sense.
73 weeks, I should have known.
You've got people who have never dealt with agriculture before who are dealing with agriculture. You've got people who deal with guns and bullets dealing with agriculture. People who deal with tobacco on a mass import scale, like illegal tobacco and illegal alcohol dealing with agriculture. It doesn't make sense.
You know what? On a wider note to this, it's not quite as random as you might think, because consider it on a government of any level, doesn't matter who's in power, it's irrelevant. They always have ministerial shake-ups and turnaround. So one minute, on Tuesday, you're an expert in agriculture, and then suddenly you're a finance minister. I mean, it's very odd. You just get dropped, you get parachuted into some position. How come you know everything about it in 2 days? It's impossible, obviously. So the whole system is skewed, but there we go. It is what it is.
Absolutely. It is what it is. So under this, so you need a license then to grow it, because hemp is considered a controlled substance. That's the whole issue around all of the hemp licensing, is that it's considered a controlled substance. Now in 1993, Britain was one of the first countries to actually legalize hemp. And we're now one of the last countries to actually roll back the regulations. So they put it under. Now I have to say, in 2007, it was much easier to grow hemp than it is actually now. Because at the time, this is very interesting. At the time, it could be 0.3% THC in the field.
Because it was Class C, right?
No, I have no idea.
I think it was just before cannabis got changed. So cannabis got changed from a Class D to a Class B, I think 2006, 2007, 2008. So maybe when cannabis got ups, you know, like almost went up as a criminal offense, then the what's it called? The hemp licenses followed.
It happened all the way through Europe. All of Europe dropped it from 0.3% THC, which is what we could grow in 2007, to 0.2% THC. The problem is that when the hemp relies on sunlight, and THC is produced as a sunlight protector. It's a UV sunlight protector. So the more sunlight there is, the more THC it produces. And so you can't actually, it's very hard to regulate the levels of THC in the plant. And so it really also then reduced the amount of seed that you could grow to enable it to remain within the 0.2% THC. So it then, of course, made it very, very unstable to grow it. Also, there's quite a lot of regulations of where you can grow it. You can't grow it near a footpath. You can't grow it near a school. You can't grow it near other houses. So you have to show your.
Sorry. What's with the footpath?
I'm not sure, but if it's near any local footpath, it's prohibited to grow, or you have to build a very big kind of fence, like a hedgerow around. It has to be hidden, basically.
Okay, and this is for industrial hemp as well, right? This isn't just.
I'm only talking about industrial hemp.
Okay,
I'm talking about hemp in all its forms.
And if you're growing, because this is one thing which I know, I've walked into someone else's wheat field before. You know, I have done it just because I like walking through fields. I've got that problem. So I've walked into someone else's wheat field before. They've never had these giant walls, which I've had to climb. It's like literally open the gate that says "Do not enter" and walk around the field. Now, like, why do you reckon?
The clue, by the way, on the sign is "Do not enter." You do know that.
It doesn't say "Do not enter," Ollie. I think they're speaking to everyone else. So it's just like, I can't read. I'm dyslexic.
Unless you're from Mill Hill and your name's Oliver Mammon.
Unless it says beware of the dog. Beware of the ball.
I like dog.
Beware of the Ollie, you mean?
But anyway, so I go into these fields and there's no restriction and there's none of these laws apply. No. So these laws only apply to the hemp industry.
Yeah, and
mental.
And apparently what we've heard from our farmers recently is that the Home Office promised to do a light touch on hemp licenses, as in give them out without being too strict. But the reports that we're getting back is that it's actually not like that, and it's becoming more and more difficult to get a hemp license. Now, in 2006, not many people were growing hemp because a number of 2007, because two of the biggest processors of hemp, which was Hempcore and Springdale, both went under. Well, Springdale went under in 2008, I think, and Hempcore a year or two later. And they were the biggest growers of hemp in the country. And once they went down, it's taken a while for the industry to get back up on its feet.
Can I
again.
ask a couple of questions, if I may?
Of course.
I know this sounds really dumb, and I'm not being facetious with this. Ollie, about his wheat field. You know, if you walk through a wheat field, what's going to happen? You're not going to make Weetabix. It's wheat. End of. There's nothing. You might chew it to look like a country yokel. Boom, finished. If you're growing hemp and there it is in a field, what's the worst that could happen? It's a genuine question. In other words, if it went, I understand near a school. Okay, fair enough. On a footpath, what's the actual worst if you're growing a hemp crop? What could happen?
Nothing. Nothing.
You're going to get high as a kite.
You can't. There's no THC in it. You could take the leaves, make some tea, and get some nice cannabinoids in you. I mean,
you might be able to juice it. That's the only thing. If you can grab enough of, if you can rob enough of it without the farmer realizing, you might be able to juice it. But even that, it's going to be wet. It's going to be like you're going to need to dry it for 3 months before you can even do anything with it. You know, the moisture content in hemp is ridiculous. So
the short answer to my serious question was sod all. There's absolutely nothing.
No, absolutely
nothing. I might as well be picking up twigs.
It's rules for the sake of rules as opposed to rules for the sake of protection. You know, rules are there to protect us. Rules are there to protect you. But sometimes rules are just in place just to be in place. There's no logic to them. I understand if it was a high THC license, of course, you want to protect your crop because it's valuable. And then also you want to make sure that you're doing things properly. That I understand. The same way that if you have, an alcohol brewery, you're not going to, you're going to have a lock on your door. That's just logical. It's like a logical thing.
Make it simpler. If you've got an electricity pylon, it is no point in putting, don't climb this, because there'll always be some numpty who says, I'm going to go and climb. They might have been to the pub, or they're just plain stupid, which you can't fix. So you've got to have a fence. It's got to be, protected. I understand that. Hence my question. What would be the worst thing if you said, oh, great, they field full of hemp? And the answer from both of you is like, nothing.
It's
like me walking my dog through a woods. Nothing.
Well,
it's actually, basically, it is the same. And like what I say is, you've actually probably got more risk walking through the woods with your dog, and your dog's going to eat like a fungi that's growing somewhere, or your dog's going to eat a plant that shouldn't be. There is more danger outside of that field than inside of that field.
I get it.
There's probably more risk to walking barefoot over stinging nettles, which are everywhere, than there are for a child even licking every plant in that hemp field.
One of their arguments is that you could grow marijuana in between a hemp field, which is the most stupidest thought, because the reality of it is, if you're growing for stem, for fiber, you're going to have really tall woody hemp varieties. If you're growing for seed, you're going to have probably more dwarf varieties. If you're growing for leaf and bud, you're going to have big fat buds everywhere. Also, the hemp could pollinate the
cross-pollination.
Cannabis,
why would you even take that risk?
You just wouldn't take that risk.
You're going to grow $5,000. What's it called? You're going to put $5,000 into growing a crop, which is going to end up being worth less than the hemp you're growing around it, because it's germinated, pollinated like garbage. So there's no logic to it. But I think one of the biggest problems is you've got firearms people and alcohol people controlling a market which they don't know anything about. There is very little cannabis education in any department which is managing the cannabis industry, and especially from a governmental level, as in you don't have experts like Rebekah working alongside these people saying, look, mate, you're about to embarrass yourself. Okay, don't say that. This is literally the most embarrassing thing you can say, is assuming that hemp can get you high. No one's saying that.
You've got to understand, Ollie, the only reason I'm here is because you insist.
It's because I love you, Ross.
I understand.
You're like one of my best mates.
It's a bromance. I get it. We've met once, but it's a bromance. But Rebekah, the serious reason I'm here, and I think this applies possibly to all these, civil servants and lawmakers, etc., is I'm here as everyman. Ollie's an expert, and all his guests are 100% experts, and I'm here asking the questions who people like myself who know zero about it, so we can dig right into it. That's the point. So I suspect that a lot of the folks who are making the law probably have the same background as me, i.e. nothing to do with this industry and this world at all.
So you made a very important point at the start of this show, Russ, about how you have an agricultural minister who knows nothing about agriculture, and you have an education minister who knows nothing about education. And during COVID, there was this big thing where they showed the entire list of ministers in the UK and exactly where they came from and what their education was and what gives them the right. Okay. And there wasn't one minister who had enough education behind him for him to be analyzing and working with the industry he's in. And it showed New Zealand. And it showed in New Zealand, you've got the head of agriculture, used to be a farmer, and the head of education used to be a head teacher, and the head of politics worked in politics. Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got all of this, you've got actually a right to the education and to the laws which are being created. Why? Because they're being created by people who understand the industry. And I feel that's one of the biggest issues with hemp is people who are trying to control it don't understand it. And of course, if you don't understand something, you're always going to fear it. That is the nature. You fear it,
and you're on way too much on the side. You should always err on the side of caution, but there's too much. Bear in mind that most politicians are career politicians. They've never actually had a job. Seriously, they've never had a job outside of politics. That's endemic in the world of politics on all sides. And then they're condemned and criticized if they have another job. They go, well, they shouldn't be having another job. So it's nobody can win on that. It's the way that it's worked for many, many years.
And it's a shame because things like carbon sequestration, which is actually very viable from hemp, and it's something Jamie Bartley spoke about previously, about if we were to have hemp fields lining all of our motorways as opposed to having other crops growing, like our carbon reduction our carbon reduction would be insane, as in it would be 3, 5, 10 times what it is.
Would it, Rebekah? Would it, if Ollie's notion was correct, let's just say, would it soak? My apologies. Would it soak it up like blotting paper? Would it help?
I mean, that's what plants do. They suck out carbon, and hemp grows in 3 months. If you're growing for fiber, can up to 5 meters. So if you work it out, then a hectare of hemp would sequester about 11 to 50 tons of carbon per hectare. So
but that's something like, I think that's like 10 times more than other varieties of crop which grow in the same amount of time, right?
Yeah, because not only does it sequester the carbon, but also it remediates the soil at the same time, and it draws the carbon back into the soil. But you have a taproot that sinks about 0.5 meter to 1 meter down, and it has filaments that spread across and connects to all the other hemp plants. So it creates some kind of, it breaks up compacted soil, it remediates soil, it brings microbiomes back to the soil, it increases soil activity like worms and insects.
And it also removes toxins from the soil.
Because it sinks so deep down, it removes the toxins and sucks toxins out of the soil. So it's a great soil remediator, and also to clean up toxic brownfield sites is fantastic. And then it was used in Chernobyl to clean up the nuclear waste from Chernobyl.
Exactly what I was going to bring up next. So basically, about
I never knew that.
So about 10 years ago, so I was in France about 10 years ago. My family's French. So I'm watching this thing on the news. I remember I wasn't, I was on the cusp of this industry, and I'm watching this thing on the news, and it's all about how, you've got this barren land. I can't remember what they had there, but they had this barren land, and they cleaned it using hemp. And what they found is, as well, I tell you what it is. So it was old mining land, all right? Old mining land. And what they found was they planted hemp. The hemp cleaned the soil, but it didn't only clean the soil. It also sucked up residual particles of gold, silver, and platinum. Then they took the plant, they burnt it, and they ended up with gold, silver, and platinum, which they couldn't originally get out of the soil because it was in nanoparticles. Like crazy things that hemp can do. Crazy.
Yeah. So answer me this, Rebekah, because this always puzzles me. I try to be a fairly logical chap. If you know this, and Ollie knows it, and several of Ollie's guests have spoken passionately about it, why isn't it being done? It's the blatantly obvious question.
Well, there's a lot of vested interests. There's a lot of vested interests. The reason why hemp was originally banned, I mean, so prior to 1937, hemp was cannabis was a widely used crop in all areas. And actually, one of the most difficult parts of the plant is the retting of the plant, which is separating the fiber from the stalk and actually being able to turn that crop into viable products. And Schlichten created a machine so rather than you leaving it in the field to ret for like 6 weeks, and by retting it means like rotting it. So once you rot it, you can release some of the fibers from the plant, but it was very labor intensive. And a lot of the slave labor, a lot of the black slaves worked in the hemp fields. It's never shown on TV, but it wasn't just the cotton fields. I mean, hemp was incredibly labor intensive. And so when slavery was abolished in the United States, then machinery started to take over, and Schlichten created this machine that you could put the hemp in green, so you didn't have to ret it, and it would come out as fiber. And in 1937, Popular Mechanics, which I guess at the time was the magazine about new technology, called hemp the $1 billion crop, because from this new machine, thousands of products could be made from that, including textiles, steel, but it really threatened a lot of vested interests like the copper, like JP Morgan had invested a lot into the copper industry because of all the telegraph poles. William Hearst had invested a lot into growing trees for his paper. Fossil fuels were just starting out, DuPont, and they started to see this real threat to some of the vested interests. So
bear in mind, the first pair of Levi's were made out of hemp.
Yeah. Denim is from neem, hemp from neem. So yes, absolutely, denim comes from.
And then you've got, you know, what's it called? The first ever Bible was printed on hemp.
Yeah,
the King James Bible. Was it King James Bible or Saint James Bible? Not really sure. I'm Jewish. I don't really know about Christian
King
Bibles.
James Bible.
One of the Bibles. Okay.
Terry James Bible. Terry James and his Bibles.
And then canvas comes from the word cannabis because it's the only seafaring fabric. It doesn't dissolve.
No
in seawater.
way.
Yeah.
And then the sails of the Viking ships, they were made from hemp. If
you
go back, like you go back, it's been used for thousands.
Well, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I built the British Empire on hemp. I mean, they used it for the Navy, for the maritime industry. I mean, this is the reason why they could go and colonize all these countries, was because they had such a strong Navy, and the Navy was built on the hemp industry, the ropes, the sails, the insulation for the boats. And the Napoleonic Wars were fought over who controlled the hemp supplies between Russia, France, and England. And so it's a very interesting. Hemp has always been a big part of our history, but it's literally been cut out. So once that magazine came out, once technology started to really make the hemp industry progressive, that's when the vested interests, who had obviously connections into the government in America, they decided to do a massive, William Hearst, who owned the newspaper, decided to do, I would say, the first ever PR campaign to change the nation's thoughts on something. And so they demonized hemp and cannabis as marijuana, but no one knew what marijuana was. Even the American Medical Association didn't know that cannabis was marijuana. They just came out with this marijuana plant, this terrible plant that was going to make you go mad. And so they brought out a marijuana tax act, and of course it affected all the hemp farmers and cannabis farmers, and effectively over a period of time they completely decimated the potential industry. And in 1942, so after this marijuana tax act, of course, it killed the industry. But in 1942, during the Second World War, they were desperate to grow hemp again because it's just such an important plant for the Navy. So
much shorter shelf life, much shorter growth span as well. You can grow in a year. You can grow 4 times what you can grow with cotton. So,
absolutely,
I mean, you get 4 times more harvest. You can. It's more labor intensive, but then it's also a hell of a lot more. It gives a much larger return to the people growing it. So it's
exactly. So they did a Hemp for Victory campaign, got everyone to grow hemp for the Second World War, which is why in the 1950s there was this whole liberalization of marijuana, and everyone was like into the cannabis again. And so that's when I did hear, I haven't actually confirmed it, but when the Americans came into the war and actually defeated Hitler, apparently all the Allied countries had to sign that they wouldn't grow hemp or cannabis. And it was around the World Bank. When the World Bank was formed, one of the premises of joining the World Bank was that you weren't allowed to grow cannabis or hemp. But France wasn't part of the allied nations, so they continued, and so did China. And the biggest consumer of hemp is the Chinese army. And the Chinese army, that all their uniform is made from hemp. And China has been growing hemp and is at the forefront of the hemp industry, and has been for thousands of years, never stopped producing hemp.
It's quite funny, Russ, because you always talk about how change comes when people realize, when the people with money start to realize that change is necessary.
I always say that.
So it's interesting that change happened originally because the people with money saw the other side, okay, and they saw the other side. They saw how damaging hemp can be to their investments, how they were not invested into it, and the people with money put power against it. The same thing, we need the opposite to happen in today's world. We need the people with power and money to put their energy for hemp and almost push it out of this grey area that we've kept it in for the last.
Here's the thing.
60 years.
It's not that the two of you are being picked on by the world. It's if you think about the electric car, they've had the electric car since the 20s.
Yeah.
And it was, there were loads of startups, certainly through the 50s and 60s and 70s. And again, as you say, and it's not being conspiratorial theorist, because I'm not. I just look at the facts, right? William Randolph Hearst didn't want his interests, and neither and DuPont and JP Morgan, etc., didn't want their interest screwed up, so they went against it. The fossil fuel folk did not want the electric car because it would take away, of course, billions and billions and billions of dollars. I understand that. So that's why they kept scuppering the electric car. Yeah. Now, it takes somebody like, I don't know, an Elon Musk or the equivalent of someone who is a futurist to look at this and say, and one day I'm sure they will. They'll look at this and go, wait a minute, this is all wrong. And they will start. I think it'll come round.
The problem is we don't have that much time left.
Why? How come?
Well, because we're in a serious climate change situation here on planet Earth, and we have a serious soil health problem, and we have a carbon and an excess of pollutants in the atmosphere, not just carbon, but obviously there's an increase in methane in the atmosphere, and we totally polluted our atmosphere. So we really need to be keeping to our climate commitments, especially the UK that signed into ACT, a climate commitment to becoming net zero by 2050.
But we are so tight. We are a little tiny island stuck in the North Sea, and we're all doing our best. And then you look at India, and you look at Pakistan, and you look at China, and these gigantic nations, right? And what are they doing? And so every time I put put the stuff in the recycle bin, I'm doing what I can here, but up against enormous industrial nations who couldn't give a monkeys.
But Ross, you can't look at it like that, because you can't worry about what anyone else is doing. What are we doing in the UK? Let the other countries sort it out, but we have signed into law as an act a climate commitment that we're going to reach net zero by 2050. And there hasn't been any change since that act has been since Theresa May signed that act into Parliament. There hasn't been any change in any systemic change. There've been tweaks, but not real viable solutions. And they're still touting planting trees as a viable solution to climate change. This seems to be grow 1 million trees and we'll all be okay, when actually there's a much better argument for growing hemp over trees. And in the COP26 in Glasgow this last year in November, Boris Johnson's biggest pledge was to end deforestation by 2030. If he really is serious about ending deforestation by 2030, we should be growing hemp. The problem is that we are still stuck in old legislation that isn't fit for purpose, I don't believe, in 2022, when we are facing serious issues now with our soil health, more than even carbon sequestration. Our soil health is in desperate need to be revitalized. Also, we've really lost a lot of our rapeseed oil. There's been big problems with rapeseed. We have lost 30% of our crop due to a beetle that they can't seem to get rid of. So there's been lots of disease and issues with rapeseed oil, and hemp is a viable cash crop as part of your arable rotation. You could be growing hemp in the summer and growing your winter wheat. There's also evidence that if you grow hemp in the summer, you have a 20 to 30% better yield of winter wheat as your follow-on crop. This is because it remediates the soil, so your soil is richer for when the wheat grows. Now, we might be in a famine situation in the next few years, so we really need to be looking at how viable our soil health is in order to, if we're growing follow-on crops or intercrops, that we're getting the best yields that we can do from them. So there's a lot of aspects to this argument. It isn't just worrying about what China is, but actually how is Britain gonna navigate through this next 10 years?
Also, this whole logic of looking at your neighbor and saying, my neighbor's not doing it, so I'm not going to do it either, is not the right way to live it.
Guys,
hold on.
I didn't say that.
Hold
I said I'm
hold
doing
on. You've got
it.
to ask the question. Now you're going to get the answer. All right,
No. I didn't.
Hold on.
I'm
not saying you, but I'm saying everyone. This is a standard mentality of, well, listen, why should I be doing this? Because them over there, they're not doing that. Now, all we can ever do is focus on us. You know, you try your hardest to be a good person, not because the person next to you is being a good person, because you want to be the best you can be. It's the same thing applies here. We want to have the best life we can have. If other people destroy it for us, then other people destroy it for us. But the least we can do is try and do something right and, you know, give ourselves the chance that we deserve, because right now we're not giving ourselves a chance we deserve. Now, I understand that it's very easy to say and harder to do. All right, I get that. But on the other side, that if you don't say, you never do. If the idea is never planted, then the idea can never be run with. And the idea needs to get planted over and over and over again until someone of power clocks in, realizes that what we're saying is actually true, realizes that the Rebekah Shamans of this world are not hippies. They are realists trying to save the freaking planet in one way or another, trying to do their bit for the world. And fact of the matter is the capitalists can still earn. The main thing is in yesterday's year, hemp would have taken money out of your pocket. I understand that. In today's world, hemp's only going to put money in your pocket for longer. Why? Because if we keep the world alive for longer, you earn more money over the length of time the world will be alive for, which is kind of the logic, isn't it? You get to keep all of us. You get to keep all of us there, you know, charging us through the teeth.
I'll be long gone. Now, two things, Rebekah. Number one, you're right about a food crisis. I'm not sure it's going to come here, but I interviewed a Ukrainian farmer weeks and weeks ago, before anybody even thought about this, because initially, obviously, your thoughts go to men, women, and children being blown to pieces by the Russians. And somebody said, why don't you try and get hold of a farmer? So I spoke to a farmer, and I had no idea. I'll be absolutely honest. I've said this before. I thought Ukraine was about the size of Surrey. It's not. It's the size of bigger than Texas. And it's the breadbasket of Europe. Did I know that? No, I did not. Why would I? Most people didn't. And of course, what they grow there goes to Northern Africa. Goes to North Africa. They're going to have
Western Europe,
and mainly North Africa is their main number one supply. And it's going to be horrendous because the farmers, you know, had to run because you can't start plowing a field when rockets are coming down on your head. That's number one. And number two, I'm going to make a plug for a guest that I had yesterday. I'd never heard of this thing, but this is something that you will find, I hope, interesting, and I hope everybody watching around the world will find interesting. There's an app, I'd never heard of it till yesterday when he was my guest, called Too Good To Go. You download this app, Too Good To Go, and it's to stop food being wasted. And before you go, oh God, not another preacher. No, hear me out. You download the app, set what area you're in, wherever you might be. It might be Mill Hill, me, South London. And it's all the stores that have got food ready to sell to you for a fraction of the price, because otherwise it's going to go. And you just rock up and you pick it up. Sort of very saving smart. Is like, say you like cheese. I like cheese. What would normally be 12 quid, it's 3 quid. All you got to do is reserve it on the app, rock up, take it. Yeah. It's an amazing app. I was so impressed with this guy. Young guy, and I was like,
I think that's very, very, very smart. The amount of food wastage is just insane. What they do in my area, which is quite nice, is there's like a food bank which works with a couple of works with most of the big supermarkets around here. Sure. And what they do is they get deliveries every day. It's open, it's free, and you can just go there and help yourself to whatever you need. And it's this whole idea of almost using that huge amount of wastage, because we are such a waste prone population. It's insane how much we waste. And you know, it's incredible that apps like this are coming into play. And you know, the more that people start to care about the little things, the more we can change the little things. It's only when you start to care about them that you start to see them. When you start to see them, you start to change them.
This is why I always listen to people like Rebekah, because what is the longest journey? The longest journey starts with the first step. You know, we're a very rich country. I know you don't think so, but compare it to the Sudan or some other place, middle of the nowhere. We're a very rich country. The fact that people don't have food on their table is absolutely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. It's ridiculous.
But we're already seeing that, Russ, though. If you go into the supermarkets now, there's empty shelves sometimes now. We've got kind of used to it because of the pandemic, and we got kind of used to it that when those shortages came in at the beginning, when people just went and panic bought.
Yeah, well.
But now I go into my supermarket and sometimes there isn't lettuce, and also if you see the lettuces now,
they're brown.
They used to be
tiny.
like 2. They're tiny, and this is like we are really reaching quite a serious issue, I think, and it's not being really talked about. I listened to an NFU representative on the radio, and they were mentioning about food shortages. But coming back to hemp, like if you know that there's a viable environmental solution to helping us reach net zero targets, to helping us maybe have better yields in our follow-on crops, to help the farmers have a cash crop during this post-Brexit, post-coronavirus landscape, why are we still hindering that potential with these outdated legislations that don't serve anybody, not even really vested interests anymore?
I get this, and I agree with you.
Ignorance of politicians, and that are still peddling. And I have to say, it's because there's no visionaries in politics anymore. They're all the same.
Why aren't you doing this?
Because visionaries don't go into politics.
There you go. You've answered your own question.
We get banned and we get arrested. That's what happens. We get held in contempt.
Rebekah, you answered your own question.
Rebekah, we've got... So go on, Russ. Finish your thing and I'll carry on.
Here's the thing, and this always puzzles me. Here you are. You're incredibly passionate. You're articulate. You're smart. You're doing it in a logical way. All the things. Speaking to me and Ollie, as lovely as it is, and to the audience who's watching and listening all over the world, great. But, the chances of them being a mover and shaker in the world of politics is pretty slim, and I'm not. Who can you speak to? Who can Rebekah Shaman go and speak to?
Well, I set up my own. I co-founded with my colleague the British Hemp Alliance to create a platform. We're the only environmental organisation in the UK that's looking at hemp as an agricultural environmental crop, and we are demanding 3 things from the government: to take the Cannabis Agency out of the Home Office and into DEFRA, so it's considered an agricultural crop, so we get some agricultural expertise into the hemp, to enable the farmers to process, harvest, and access the whole plant, because at the moment the leaf and the flower are prohibited. So the farmer can grow hemp, but they have to burn the leaf and the flower in the field. But you could cut it down.
Or they lose their license.
They can't get the license. So they have to send. So you could grow full flower, you could send it to America, get it extracted there for CBD, and then send it back and sell it here. But the farmer itself cannot get the money. So all the CBD that's available in the UK, all these billions of pounds that everyone's talking about the CBD industry, is all flowing back to China,
I know,
Canada, and America.
It's mind-boggling.
It's a pure import business, and like we were speaking about,
it's a pure import business.
We were speaking to Jamie Bartley about this. Yeah. Jamie Bartley was talking about how from, I think, the fields that he has, if he was allowed to grow, he could grow enough CBD extract for the entire British population. And it would be more cost effective, and it would be locally grown. It would be, less, what's the word? It has to pass through less hands, so like the carbon footprint on it will be a hell of a lot less as well. It's not like the hemp has to be transported all the way around the world and back again in order to consume it. It generally makes the whole process better, and also it puts us on the map as having a GDP as opposed to just exporting all of our money.
Yeah, we're the second biggest consumers of CBD after America. I mean, we've really taken to CBD, and we love hemp. I mean, we grew hemp. Henry VIII, like I said, and Elizabeth I, it was illegal not to grow hemp under their reigns. You had to grow 1/4 of an acre, 1 rood. The ROOD.
The Queen sleeps on a mattress made of hemp. So there is a bed company in the UK called Harrison Spink.
Yeah.
Okay, and Harrison Spink are bed makers to the Queen. They are like around 10 years ago, they were one of the only people who actually had a hemp growing license. They don't have a problem. They can grow it and do whatever they want. But they do it specifically because...
Why would that be beneficial?
Because the antimicrobial benefits of hemp enable the mattress to be 6 years because of the unhygienic of it. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up.
We good?
Damn it, man.
Sorry.
So you're saying that it gets rid of the germs?
Yeah, it's antimicrobial and also it's recyclable. So your mattress is recyclable as opposed to your mattress being a
biodegradable. So all the things that you can grow with hemp, you can cut down, turn into products that are then biodegradable and go back to the land. So it's a carbon neutral process or carbon negative process. Also, it really can benefit into your into the bio and circular economies and the domestic economies. I mean, this is really important. We are looking at a post-Brexit, post-coronavirus landscape when we are desperately in need of solutions to boosting this green economy, and hemp is a fantastic solution to boosting our green economy, to allowing the domestic industry to rise up and bring innovation, bring research and development, bring seed development, genetic development, bring technology to this industry. But while the government are still stuck in old paradigms, we are left in this kind of grey area, because while hemp is still considered a controlled substance or still under that banner, we will never be able to really utilize it because the Proceeds of Crime Act is stopping it. This is a big issue, and also because of the whole licensing, you can't get banking pathways. I mean, I couldn't even get, for the British Hemp Alliance, I couldn't go to Metro Bank and I couldn't open up a bank account with Metro Bank or with a number of high street banks because it was hemp. Even though I'm not even selling hemp, I'm selling a membership. It's a membership, the British Hemp Alliance, and I still couldn't get.
Do you have any politicians on your side? Is there anyone who's a friendly ear to you?
So I'm on the APPG for CBD products. I'm on the Secretariat Advisory Board, and Crispin Blunt and Baroness Manzoor are heading this, and we are now trying to really get this this message to MPs, because drug policy is changing in the UK and very, very quickly. We're seeing psychedelic therapy coming out, which is a whole nother area, and cannabis is somehow connected to this huge rise in psychedelic therapy. There's a lot of investment. We're one of the leaders in research on psychedelic therapy. So they're trying to change the drug laws, of which cannabis is kind of under that. I don't think cannabis should be under the psychedelic laws, because it's not psychedelic. It's something
I just hope with psychedelic therapy it means we don't have to listen to double concept albums, which I was hoping would die in the 60s.
No, I'm not sure there's anything like that. But
I'm really excited for the Pink Floyd therapy. I think that's going to be incredible.
God,
like the Pink Floyd sound circle. Do you know what I mean? I'm excited for that.
I think it depends what you're taking. Yes, obviously, if you're going to go on
if
some
you're
kind of
not
LSD
off your face, you think
Grateful Dead yoga, right? I like it.
So, I mean, we're seeing a big shift in drug legislation, and actually it's going to be very important that hemp doesn't get sucked in this maelstrom that's starting to come around drug laws.
You're so such a firebrand, and we need you on the we.
You know what I mean by the punch now, right?
What's that?
You know what I mean by now? She's got like a punch.
No.
Well, she's
very quiet. I just wish you'd find a guest who wasn't so shy. That's just
annoying.
Ollie.
I need to find some boring guests. That's what I need to do.
Boring, nothing to say
There's
for
no boring
themselves.
guests.
No opinions.
Thunder. How dare you?
Find these people. They're so dull.
There's nothing. Anyone who's in hemp is passion and love.
Week after week, dull people.
A little bit of craziness.
Here's the thing, Rebekah. I wish you all the best, because change comes from, I'm not being zen about it, I mean from within. When you're on the outside and you can yell and shout and you're banging on the window, usually sod all happens. Like with Musk buying Twitter, which will now, of course, age this show, but when he bought it the other day, he got in on the inside. He wasn't happy. He got in, and that's what I hope you find the right people who are on the inside who go, you know what, she's absolutely right. This is nuts. And they can then power you through. That's always the way, isn't it?
We are seeing that, Russ. We are definitely seeing that. Like from 2006 to now, it's a whole nother landscape, and we're getting there. It's just how quickly can we get there? That's the key, because this isn't urgent. We're in urgency now, and so the sooner the better, and the more people can benefit from it.
Now we got 30 in 30 seconds. Tell people how they can get hold of you.
So if you want to get hold of me, the British Hemp Alliance.co.uk is the lobbying group that I am co-director of. You can email me at Rebekah@thebritishhempalliance.co.uk. Please do come on. We have individual memberships. It's for people who really care about the environment, who really see hemp as a viable solution. And we only take memberships. We're not funded by anybody. We are completely free of all corporate connections.
We love that.
So we're here just for the hemp. We're completely independent.
If only we were independent of time, but sadly we're not. Rebekah, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
We'll be back same time next week. Try and stay out of trouble till then. Bye-bye.